My dear brothers and sisters, sincerity is the soul of every action in Islam. A deed may appear small in the eyes of people, unnoticed and unpraised, yet in the sight of Allah, it can rise to immense greatness when it is carried by a pure intention. The heart is the place Allah looks at, not the outward form of the action. A single lukma eaten with gratitude, a quiet dua whispered with presence, a small charity given without anyone knowing can outweigh actions that seem huge but are empty of sincerity. This is why Islam teaches us to guard our intentions more than our actions. The heart turns an ordinary moment into worship. When intention is sincere, the simplest deed becomes a bridge to Allah's pleasure. A believer learns that greatness is not in quantity, but in truthfulness before Allah, where no mask can remain and no intention can be hidden. Many people delay goodness, thinking they must wait for the perfect time or the perfect level of faith. But sincerity does not require perfection. It requires honesty. A heart that turns to Allah even while struggling is more beloved than a heart that performs many actions without humility. When you act sincerely, you admit your weakness, your need, and your dependence on Allah. This admission itself is worship. Even if the deed is small, the heart behind it may be crying, hoping, and trusting Allah completely. Such a heart is alive. Islam teaches that Allah multiplies the reward of sincere deeds beyond imagination. What seems insignificant to you may be enormous in the unseen world. A sincere intention transforms weakness into strength and scarcity into abundance. In moments of hunger, hardship, or exhaustion, sincerity becomes even more powerful. When the body is weak, the heart speaks louder. That is why a small act done during fasting carries a special weight. Hunger softens the heart, removes pride, and reminds the soul of its dependence on Allah. A simple act done in this state with awareness of Allah carries a depth that cannot be measured. The believer does not rush through worship in these moments, but pauses, allowing the heart to be present. This presence is sincerity. It is not about impressing anyone or meeting expectations. It is about standing honestly before Allah, acknowledging His favors and seeking His mercy. In that moment, even silence becomes worship, and even restraint becomes obedience. Sincerity also protects deeds from being wasted. Many actions lose their value when mixed with showing off, pride, or seeking approval from people. Islam teaches that even a large deed can become empty if the intention is corrupted. A believer constantly checks the heart, asking why this action is being done and for whom. This self-accountability is a sign of faith. When sincerity is present, the believer finds peace even if no one notices their effort. The reward is expected only from Allah. This freedom from people's opinions lightens the heart and strengthens faith. The believer learns to do small acts consistently with a pure heart rather than chasing recognition. In this way, sincerity becomes a shield that preserves deeds until the day they are most needed. A sincere heart also brings closeness to Allah that no amount of outward action alone can achieve. When intention is pure, the believer feels a sweetness in obedience, even in small things. The act may be brief, but its impact lingers in the heart. Sincerity connects the servant directly to Allah without barriers. It teaches the believer to value moments of truthfulness over long displays of action. One tear shed sincerely, one repentance made honestly, one act done purely for Allah can change the direction of a life. Islam elevates the inner state above appearances, reminding us that Allah knows what is hidden. In that hidden space, sincerity turns the smallest deed into something azim in the scales of the hereafter. Allah draws nearest to the servant at the moment when the heart is most broken. When strength disappears and pride collapses, the soul finally speaks in truth. Islam teaches us that weakness before Allah is not humiliation, it is honor. A heart that breaks for His sake is a heart He never turns away from. In moments when words fail and only tears remain, Allah understands without explanation. This is when dua rises without effort, when sincerity flows without force. Many people search for Allah in moments of ease, but they truly meet Him in moments of desperation. Brokenness strips away false confidence and leaves only dependence. And dependence upon Allah is the essence of Iman. When the heart is shattered, it becomes soft. And a soft heart is closer to Allah than a hardened one filled with pride. When a believer feels lost, exhausted, or overwhelmed, they often think Allah has distanced Himself. In reality, this is the moment Allah is closest. He listens more attentively to a trembling voice than to confident words spoken without feeling. Islam reminds us that Allah is with those whose hearts are wounded, not with those who feel self-sufficient. Brokenness removes illusions of control and exposes the truth that everything rests in Allah's hands. The believer who turns to Allah in pain has already taken a step toward healing. Even if the situation does not immediately change, the heart begins to change. And when the heart changes, closeness to Allah increases. This closeness brings a calm that does not depend on circumstances but on certainty in Allah's mercy. There is a special purity in worship that comes from pain. A prayer offered in tears carries a depth that comfort cannot create. In brokenness, the believer stops pretending and begins surrendering. Islam teaches that Allah does not love arrogance, but He loves humility. And nothing humbles the heart like hardship. When everything falls apart, the believer finally looks up. That upward glance is worship. That silent plea is remembrance. Allah responds not always by removing the pain, but by strengthening the heart to carry it. This strength is a gift that only comes through closeness. Many hearts are saved through hardship more than through ease. What feels like loss may be the door to intimacy with Allah that ease never opened. Brokenness also purifies intentions. When a believer has nothing left to rely on, sincerity becomes natural. There is no audience to impress, no strength to show, no image to protect. Only Allah remains. In this state, the heart speaks honestly, and honesty is beloved to Allah. Islam teaches that Allah is with the one who remembers Him in loneliness and turns to Him in weakness. The servant who calls upon Allah when no one else can help has placed their trust in the right place. This reliance is a form of worship greater than many outward actions. Brokenness becomes a bridge that connects the servant directly to their Lord without distractions or pride standing in the way. Every believer will face moments where the heart feels shattered and faith feels heavy. These moments are not signs of rejection but invitations to closeness. Allah does not abandon His servant in their lowest point. He draws nearer. The believer may feel empty, but that emptiness creates space for Allah's mercy to descend. In brokenness, the heart learns patience, trust, and surrender. These qualities are not learned in comfort. Islam teaches that Allah heals hearts not by denying pain, but by filling it with His presence. When the believer realizes that Allah was closest during their hardest moments, fear begins to fade. Brokenness becomes meaningful, and pain becomes a path that leads not away from Allah, but straight toward Him. The moment of Iftar is not an ordinary moment. It is a sacred pause where hunger, humility, and hope meet together. Throughout the day, the fasting person restrains their desires purely for Allah. And by the time the sun sets, the heart becomes soft and alert. In this state, the believer realizes their weakness and dependence more clearly than at any other time. Islam teaches that this is a moment of special closeness to Allah, a moment when the doors of mercy are wide open. The thirst reminds the soul of its need, and the hunger reminds the heart of gratitude. Just before breaking the fast, the believer stands between patience and relief, and that balance makes the dua rise with sincerity. Words spoken at this time are not casual. They come from a heart that has been disciplined, humbled, and focused. The fasting person does not need eloquence at iftar. Even a simple whisper is enough. Allah looks at the state of the heart, not the perfection of words. When hands are raised at that moment, they carry the weight of an entire day of obedience. Islam honors this moment because fasting breaks the ego and silences distractions. The believer is no longer thinking of the world, but of relief, mercy, and reward from Allah. That sincerity is why the dua of iftar holds such power. Even if the tongue struggles to speak, the heart is already speaking. This is a time when tears come easily and hopes feel alive again. A believer may ask for forgiveness, guidance, relief, or strength, knowing that Allah do. Not ignore a heart that has endured hunger for His sake. At iftar, the believer stands at the edge of acceptance. The fast is ending, but the reward is just beginning. Islam teaches that Allah loves patience, and fasting is one of the purest forms of patience. That patience shapes the dua, giving it depth and truth. When hunger has been endured without complaint, the heart becomes honest in its requests. There is no arrogance in that moment, only need. The believer realizes that every blessing comes from Allah, even the food placed before them. This realization turns the act of breaking the fast into worship. The dua made at this time carries gratitude, humility, and trust all at once. Such a dua is not rushed, it is felt. And what is felt deeply is raised sincerely. Many believers underestimate the power of consistency at iftar. Day after day, the same moment returns, offering another chance for acceptance. Islam teaches that Allah loves repeated turning toward Him. Even if yesterday's dua felt unanswered, today's dua is still heard. The fasting person learns not to lose hope, but to keep asking. At iftar, the believer brings the worries of the day, the fears of the future, and the regrets of the past, placing them all before Allah. This habit strengthens faith and builds reliance. The believer begins to trust that Allah chooses the best time and form for every response. Sometimes the answer comes quickly, sometimes later, and sometimes as protection from harm. But the dua itself is never wasted. The moment before breaking the fast is also a moment of surrender. The believer admits that without Allah, even food cannot benefit them. This awareness deepens the relationship between the servant and their Lord. Islam teaches that Allah loves when His servant asks Him directly without doubt. At iftar, the heart is free from distractions and full of hope. That hope is an act of worship. The believer learns to pause before eating, to give priority to dua over desire. This pause trains the soul to choose Allah first. In that brief moment, the believer may ask for Jannah, forgiveness, healing, guidance, or steadfastness. The simplicity of the request does not lessen its value. What matters is the state of the heart, softened by fasting and filled with trust in Allah's mercy.